Have you ever wondered where your fresh tuna actually comes from before it hits the grocery store? Today we are not inside a factory. We are standing right in the middle of a real open fish market. Loud, busy, raw, and absolutely fascinating. The smell of the ocean is in the air. Vendors are calling out prices. Buyers are moving fast. And right in front of us, whole tuna fish are being cut down by hand. Skill that most Americans have never seen up close. This is not a machine doing the work. This is one person, one knife, and decades of experience. And once you see how this is really done, you will never look at a piece of tuna the same way again. Let us get into it. The tuna arrives at the market in whole form. Fresh off the boat, iced down, eyes still clear and bright. A clear eye means a fresh fish. That is the first thing every experienced buyer checks before anything else. Cloudy eyes mean the fish has been sitting too long. It sounds like a small detail, but it is actually one of the most reliable freshness indicators you can use without any equipment at all. These fish can weigh anywhere from 20 pounds all the way up to over 100 pounds depending on the species. The vendor lifts it onto the cutting board like it weighs nothing. For him, this is just another morning. For us, it is something extraordinary. Before the knife even comes out, the vendor inspects the fish carefully. He runs his hand along the belly, checks the gills. They should be deep red, not brown or gray. He presses the flesh with his thumb. If it bounces back immediately, the fish is fresh. If it stays dented, it has been sitting too long. He even bends the fish slightly to check for rigor. A fresh fish holds some stiffness. A limp fish has already started breaking down at the cellular level. This quick inspection takes about 10 seconds, but it tells an experienced eye everything they need to know. Buyers watching from across the stall are already leaning in. Now the knife comes out, and this is not your average kitchen knife. This is a long, thin, flexible blade, purpose-built for breaking down large fish. In some markets, you will see Japanese-style Yanagiba blades that can run 18 inches long. In others, traditional Western fillet knives worn smooth from years of sharpening. Either way, the edge is razor sharp. Here is something most people do not realize. A sharp knife is actually safer than a dull one. A dull blade requires more force, which means more chance of slipping. A sharp blade glides through flesh with almost no pressure at all. A good vendor sharpens his knife multiple times throughout the morning. The sound of steel on a whetstone is as much a part of the fish market soundtrack as the vendors calling out prices. The first cut is the head. One clean, powerful stroke just behind the gills. No hesitation, no second attempt. The head comes off in a single motion, and the crowd nearby goes quiet for just a second. Some vendors keep the head. Tuna collar, the piece just behind the head, is considered a delicacy in many cultures. Grilled tuna collar is one of the most flavorful parts of the entire fish. The fat content around the collar is high, and when it hits a hot grill, the result is something almost addictive. Most Americans throw it away without knowing what they are missing. If you ever see tuna collar available at a fish market, buy it without hesitation. Ask the vendor to score it and take it home and grill it with nothing but salt. You will be shocked. But here is something surprising that most shoppers walking past this stall never stop to think about. A whole tuna has 4 main loins, 2 on top, 2 on the bottom. Every piece of tuna steak, every sushi roll, every can of chunk light you have ever eaten in your entire tongue. Life came from one of those 4 loins. Everything. The vendor is working towards separating them right now, and the way he does it is almost surgical in its precision. The tail comes off next. Then the fish is laid on its side and the knife enters just above the spine, running the full length of the fish in one long drawing motion. The sound of the blade against the backbone is distinctive, a soft, consistent scraping that tells the cutter he is following the bone perfectly. Go too deep and you hit the spine and waist meat. Stay too shallow and you leave the best flesh behind. The skill is in staying exactly on the bone for the entire length of the cut. On a 50-pound fish, that is a cut that travels nearly 3 feet in a single stroke. One unbroken, confident line. But here is the part that blows people away every single time. The vendor does this without looking down at the knife. His eyes are on the fish, watching the tension in the flesh, reading the resistance as the blade moves through it. His hands know the path. He has made this exact cut thousands of times across years of work. The muscle memory is so deep, it has become pure instinct. This is a craft that takes years to develop and cannot be learned from a tutorial. You have to do it, fail, correct, and repeat until your hands understand what your eyes cannot always see. Once the top loin is removed, he flips the fish and repeats on the other side. 2 top loins off the board already. Then the fish is turned belly up and the bottom loins are removed the same way. What is left is the backbone and rib cage, still carrying meat between the ribs, which vendors will often sell cheaply for soups, stocks, and chowders. In a busy household kitchen, tuna bones make a deeply flavorful broth that most home cooks have never tried. Nothing goes to waste at a good fish market. Every part of that animal gets used by someone who knows its value. Now the loins are laid out on the board, and this is where buyers start gathering around the stall. Because this is the moment you can action. Allies see the quality of the fish in full. The color of fresh tuna flesh should be a deep, vibrant red to pink depending on the species. Yellowfin tuna has a bright ruby red color that almost looks unreal. Albacore is paler, almost pink or ivory. Big eye tuna has a deeper, almost burgundy tone with visible fat marbling running through it. If the flesh looks brown or dull at the surface, walk away. Brown tuna is not necessarily unsafe, but it is old, and old fish does not taste the same. The flavor flattens. The texture softens in the wrong way. Color is not everything, but it tells you a great deal. The vendor now trims the bloodline, that dark, almost purple strip of meat running through the center of each loin. The bloodline has a much stronger, more intense flavor that divides opinion sharply. Some people absolutely love it for its intensity and depth. Most American buyers prefer it removed because the flavor can be overwhelming, especially when the fish is cooked over high heat. In Japanese and Korean markets, the bloodline is often sold separately at a lower price for use in strongly seasoned dishes where bold fish flavor is welcome. At a good open market, a skilled vendor will ask your preference before he trims. That small personal touch is the difference between a vendor who sees you as just another transaction and one who actually cares about what ends up on your plate. Here is a fact that will permanently change the way you shop for fish. The moment a tuna loin is cut open, oxidation begins immediately. The flesh starts losing its vibrant color within hours, even under proper refrigeration. Some vendors, not necessarily here but out there in the wider market world, treat tuna with carbon monoxide gas to keep the flesh looking bright red for days beyond its natural freshness window. This practice is legal in the United States when disclosed on the label, but it is deeply controversial among professional chefs and food safety advocates. The fish looks fresh, but the flavor and texture may have already declined significantly. At an open market like this one, you watch the fish being broken down right in front of your eyes in real time. You know exactly when it was cut because you just watched it happen. That transparency is the single greatest advantage of buying from an open market vendor over a prepackaged grocery store product. What you see is exactly what you get. After the loins are broken down and trimmed, the vendor starts cutting steaks. Each steak is sliced perpendicular to the loin, about 1 inch to 1.5 inches thick for grilling or pan-searing. Watch how he uses the full length of the blade in each slice, not a back-and-forth sawing motion, but a single long draw from the heel of the knife to the tip. Sawing tears the muscle fibers apart and ruins the texture of the flesh. One clean drawing slice preserves the integrity of the muscle structure completely. The difference this makes on your plate is real and immediately noticeable. A properly sliced tuna steak holds together through the entire cooking process. A sawed steak falls apart before it even hits the pan properly. The vendor knows his regulars deeply. A familiar face walks up to the stall and says simply, "The usual." No further conversation needed. They ain't. Vendor already knows exactly what that means. 2 center-cut steaks, about 1.25 inches thick. He reaches for the thickest part of the loin, the true center section, and slices 2 perfect pieces without a single word exchanged. Center cut is the most prized portion of the loin. Even thickness from edge to edge, consistent fat marbling throughout, and ideal geometry for getting a perfect sear on both sides simultaneously. The tail end of the loin tapers and cooks unevenly no matter what you do. The belly portion is fattier and requires completely different heat management. Knowing which cut you want and why is the mark of someone who actually understands what they are buying and how they plan to cook it. For customers buying sushi-grade tuna, the vendor works differently and with noticeably more care. The slabs are cut thicker, handled with extra deliberateness, kept directly on fresh ice at every moment between cuts. Here is something important. Sushi grade is not an official FDA designation. No government agency certifies fish as sushi grade. It is a term used by vendors to communicate that the fish is fresh enough and has been handled with enough care throughout the entire chain to be eaten raw with reasonable confidence. At a market like this, you can look the vendor directly in the eye and ask, "When did this fish come off the boat?" A trustworthy vendor answers immediately and specifically. A great vendor can tell you the name of the vessel and the approximate catch date. Now take a moment and look at the overall speed of this entire operation. From a whole intact tuna to individual retail steaks, a skilled open market vendor can break down a large fish completely in under 10 to 12 minutes. In a busy Saturday morning at a popular fish market, one experienced vendor might process 8 to 15 whole tuna before noon. That is potentially over 1,000 pounds of fish, broken down entirely by hand, with nothing but a knife, a cutting board, and skill built over many years. No machinery, no automation, no computer systems, just a human being who is extraordinarily good at one very specific thing and does it with quiet confidence every single day. The trim and scrap pieces from the cutting process never go to waste at a well-run stall. Belly trim, collar pieces, and smaller irregular cuts get packaged separately and priced lower for customers who know what to do with them. The belly of a tuna, called toro in Japanese cuisine, is extraordinarily rich in fat and absolutely packed with deep, complex flavor. At a high-end sushi restaurant in Manhattan or Los Angeles, fatty toro is routinely one of the most expensive items on the entire menu. At an open fish market, that same cut is often available loose by the pound for a fraction of the restaurant price. Most shoppers walk right past it without knowing what it is. The regulars snap it up before 9 in the morning without hesitation every single time. Some vendors at open markets will do fully custom cuts while you stand there watching. You point to the exact section of loin you want. You tell them the thickness, you tell them how many pieces, you tell them what you are cooking, and they might adjust the recommendation based on that information. They cut it right in front of you to your exact specification while you watch. Try asking for that level of service at a grocery store. This is the fundamental advantage of an open market that no supermarket chain can ever fully replicate. The fish is fresher because the turnover is faster, the cut is customized to your specific cooking method, and you are buying directly from someone who understands the product deeply, personally, and with genuine pride. The relationship between a loyal customer and a skilled fish market vendor is one of the most genuine commercial relationships still surviving in modern American food culture. The ice management at a professional stall deserves its own moment of attention because most people walk past without noticing it at all. Ice is everywhere, packed underneath each whole fish waiting to be cut, packed around the broken-down loins, covering the finished steaks on display. This is not simply about keeping the product cold for food safety purposes. Proper icing keeps the flesh firm and the surface appropriately dry, which directly affects how well a tuna steak performs in a hot pan. Wet fish steams in the pan instead of searing. Properly chilled and surface-dried fish develops a crust. Beyond the cooking implications, ice management tells you everything you need to know about how seriously a vendor takes their product and their customers. A stall with sloppy, sparse, or dirty ice is cutting corners somewhere else too. Always look at the ice before you look at the fish. Here is something most casual market visitors completely overlook while walking the stalls. The cutting boards used at professional fish operations are chosen and maintained with deliberate care. They must be non-porous, so bacteria cannot survive and multiply in surface cracks and grooves. High-density polyethylene boards are the professional standard in most regulated market environments. A responsible vendor rinses and sanitizes the board between each whole fish being broken down. In well-run operations, vendors rotate between two boards, one actively in use, one being cleaned and sanitized. This practice matters enormously for the safety of the product you carry home, especially if any part of your purchase will be consumed raw or undercooked. By mid-morning, the energy at the market shifts noticeably. The early rush of restaurant buyers and serious home cooks who know to arrive first has passed. The vendors are still working steadily, but the tempo changes slightly. The absolute prime center-cut pieces from the first fish of the morning are already sold and long gone. What remains is still excellent, genuinely fresh fish, just different cuts at adjusted prices. This is actually the best moment for casual shoppers who have flexibility about which exact cut they take home. End cuts, belly pieces, collar sections, all discounted, all genuinely delicious, all going home with buyers who know what they are looking at and are not too proud to take the less glamorous piece. As the morning approaches its final stretch, remaining whole fish and large loin sections get marked down further and further. A smart vendor prices aggressively at the end of the session, rather than carry anything into the next day. Fresh fish has no tomorrow in this business. This daily rhythm, premium prices for prime cuts early, generous discounts on everything late, creates a market ecosystem where every type of buyer finds their perfect moment. If you are flexible about which specific cut you need and you arrive in the last 45 minutes before the market closes, you can walk away with extraordinary fish at truly remarkable prices. The experience of standing at an open fish market and watching a whole tuna be broken down entirely by hand is something that every person who genuinely loves food in America should do at least once in their life. It closes a gap between you and your food that modern grocery shopping has made almost impossibly wide over the past few decades. You see the whole animal. You watch each individual cut being made. You choose your specific piece by pointing at it. You watch it wrapped and handed to you directly. You carry it home and cook it that same day. There is a directness to that experience, a genuine realness, that a plastic tray under fluorescent lights in a supermarket simply cannot replicate no matter how good the marketing is. It changes how you cook, how you shop, and ultimately, how you eat. And the cooking itself could not be more straightforward when the fish is genuinely this fresh. A cast iron pan or heavy stainless steel skillet screaming hot before the fish goes anywhere near it. A thin coat of high smoke point oil, avocado oil, or grapeseed work perfectly. Salt and pepper applied to the steak just before it drops into the pan, not before. 2 full minutes on the first side without touching it or moving it at all. Flip exactly once. 90 seconds on the second side. Rest for 1 minute off the heat. That is the entire process. Fresh high-quality tuna at this level needs absolutely nothing more than proper heat and basic seasoning. The fish does all the talking. Any elaborate sauce or marinade you add on top of something this good is just noise. So here is your challenge after watching this video today. Find the nearest open fish market in your city or town, and most American cities have at least one if you look. Get there early on a Saturday morning, ideally before 8. Watch the vendors work for a few minutes before you buy anything at all. Ask real questions. Where did this come from? When did it arrive? Which cut is best for what you are planning to make tonight? Then buy 1 piece of the freshest tuna available and cook it that same evening as simply as possible. The difference between that experience and a grocery store piece sitting in modified atmosphere packaging for 4 days will be immediately obvious, and you will not forget it. Let us take a step back from the cutting board for a moment and talk about something that most fish buyers in America have never seriously considered: the economics of a single tuna fish from the moment it is caught to the moment it lands on your dinner plate. Because the price you pay at this market stall is the end result of a long and surprisingly complex financial chain, and understanding that chain changes how you think about the value of what you are buying. A commercial tuna fishing vessel is not a cheap operation. A mid-sized purse-seine vessel costs millions of dollars to build and hundreds of thousands of dollars per year to operate. Fuel alone on a month-long fishing trip can cost tens of thousands of dollars. Add crew wages, maintenance, port fees, ice, supplies, and the cost of the fishing license and quota allocation, and you begin to understand that a fishing captain needs to come back with serious volume to make the economics work. The fish at this market has already absorbed all of those costs before it ever left the port it was landed at. When you pay a fair price at an open market stall, you are not being overcharged. You are paying the true costas of food produced with real effort and real risk. The fishing quota system is something else entirely that shapes what fish is available at markets like this one and at what price. In the United States, Federal Fisheries Management through NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, sets annual catch limits for each commercially important tuna species based on stock assessments conducted by marine biologists. These limits are then allocated to fishing vessels through a quota system. A vessel without quota allocation cannot legally land that species. The quota itself has financial value. It can be bought, sold, and leased between vessel owners. This creates a market within the market, an invisible financial layer underneath the visible one where fish are bought and sold by weight. Understanding that the fish on this cutting board represents not just the cost of catching it but also the cost of the legal right to catch it gives you a fuller picture of where the price comes from. But here is where the story gets genuinely interesting from an economic standpoint. The tuna market is global in a way that almost no other food market is. The same species of fish that this vendor is selling by the pound at this open market today is simultaneously being sold at Tsukiji and Toyosu in Tokyo, at Billingsgate in London, at fish markets in Seoul, Sydney, and Singapore. The price at each of those markets influences the others in real time because buyers and wholesalers are operating across all of them simultaneously. When a bad weather event in the Pacific reduces catches for 2 weeks, fish prices at markets in Los Angeles and New York respond within days. The open market you are standing in right now is connected to a global price network in ways that a corn farmer in Iowa or a cattle rancher in Texas simply is not. The ocean is one market. Now watch the vendor as he begins on his next fish. Notice that he does not start every fish exactly the same way. He is reading this particular animal before he makes his first cut. Each fish is slightly different. Different weight, different fat distribution, different proportions. A vendor who has been doing this for years develops a pre-cut assessment that happens in the first 30 seconds of handling a new fish. He is registering its weight distribution, the firmness of the belly, the thickness of the back. All of this information influences the subtle adjustments he will make during the breakdown. Where exactly to enter with the knife, how much angle to use along the spine, whether the belly cuts need to be thicker or thinner on this particular animal. No two fish are identical and no two breakdowns are exactly the same. The appearance of repetition is actually the appearance of constant micro-adjustment. Here is something that most people who cook tuna at home have never thought to ask. Should you wash fresh tuna before cooking it? The answer from food safety professionals and serious chefs is consistently no, and the reasoning is worth understanding. Washing raw fish under tap water does not remove bacteria effectively. What it does do is splash water containing any surface bacteria onto your sink, your counter, your hands, and potentially other food nearby. This cross-contamination risk is real and measurable. The better approach is to pat the fish dry with paper towels, which removes surface moisture and is far safer than washing. The high heat of cooking handles any surface bacteria far more effectively than water ever could. This is one of those pieces of kitchen knowledge that seems counterintuitive at first, but makes complete sense once you understand the actual biology involved. Let us talk about the tools of this trade in more depth because the e-knife is only the beginning of what a serious fish market vendor uses and maintains. Beyond the primary breaking knife, most experienced vendors carry a boning knife for working around the ribcage and collar, a flexible fillet knife for fine work and skinning, and a heavy cleaver for tasks that require force rather than finesse. Splitting the spine on a very large fish, for example, or cutting through the cartilaginous areas near the head. Each of these tools is maintained with obsessive care because a knife that is even slightly less than perfectly sharp costs the vendor money every single day in lost yield from imprecise cuts. Some vendors spend 30 minutes before the market opens doing nothing but sharpening and honing their blades. That half hour of preparation is paid back many times over in the quality of the work that follows. The cutting board surface itself is also a professional tool that most observers dismiss as a detail. At a serious fish operation, the board is replaced or resurfaced regularly because even microscopic grooves in the surface created by knife work can harbor bacteria and affect hygiene. Some vendors use color-coded boards, different colors for different species or different tasks, to prevent cross-contamination between raw products. The entire workstation is designed around the principle that speed and hygiene are not competing values. You can be fast and clean simultaneously if the workspace is designed correctly and the habits are ingrained deeply enough. Now let us talk about something that the open market experience teaches you that you genuinely cannot learn anywhere else: how to have a real conversation with the person selling you food. This sounds simple. It is not. Most Americans have been conditioned by decades of supermarket shopping into a transactional relationship with food retail, where conversation beyond the minimum is unusual and even slightly uncomfortable. The open market breaks that conditioning because conversation is built into the structure of how the market works. The vendor needs to know what you are making. You need to know what came in fresh this morning. Both parties have information the other one needs. The exchange that results is not small talk. It is two people collaborating toward the same goal, getting you the best possible product for your specific purpose today. Ask a vendor at a good open fish market what they recommend and watch what happens. They do not point at the most expensive item. A good vendor points at whatever genuinely deserves to be eaten today based on what came in, what is at peak freshness right now, and what your stated cooking purpose is. They might tell you that the yellowfin is spectacular this week, but the albacore is only average and not worth the price. They might tell you that the swordfish came in this morning and is as good as anything they have seen this season. This kind of honest guidance is the foundation of the relationship between vendor and regular customer, and it is built on the vendor's willingness to prioritize your satisfaction over their short-term margin on a single transaction. Here is a dimension of tuna at open markets that deserves its own extended discussion: the difference between wild-caught and farmed tuna, and what that means practically for the buyer standing at a stall like this one. The overwhelming majority of tuna sold at OP in fish markets in the United States is wild-caught. Tuna aquaculture exists, primarily in Japan, Australia, and the Mediterranean. But it remains limited in scale compared to wild harvest, and farmed tuna is far less commonly available at American retail markets. Wild tuna that has spent its life in the open ocean chasing prey across thousands of miles has a muscle density and flavor profile that reflects that life entirely. The flesh is lean, intensely flavored, and nutritionally dense in ways that farmed fish, fed on controlled diets in enclosures, simply cannot fully replicate. This is not a judgment against aquaculture. It serves important purposes in terms of reducing pressure on wild stocks, but it is an honest assessment of what the difference tastes like on a plate. The omega-3 fatty acid content of wild tuna deserves a specific mention because it is one of the primary reasons nutritionists and cardiologists have consistently recommended tuna as a heart-healthy food for decades. Omega-3s, specifically EPA and DHA, are long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids that the human body cannot synthesize in meaningful quantities on its own. We must get them from diet. Tuna, particularly the fattier cuts from the belly and collar, is one of the richest natural sources of these compounds available in the American food supply. The research supporting their role in reducing inflammation, supporting cardiovascular function, and contributing to brain health is extensive and spans decades of clinical study. A single tuna steak from a market like this one provides more beneficial omega-3s than most Americans consume in an entire week from their regular diet. But here is the nuance that the omega-3 conversation requires. The fat content, and therefore the omega-3 density, varies dramatically between different parts of the same fish. The belly cuts that many buyers pass over because of their higher fat content are actually the most nutritionally valuable portions of the animal. The loin cuts that everyone reaches for first are leaner, lower in fat, and correspondingly lower in omega-3 content. If you are buying tuna specifically for its health benefits, the belly is the cut you want, not the loin. This is counterintuitive to most American buyers who have been conditioned by decades of low-fat dietary messaging to view fat in food as something to minimize. The nutritional science has moved well past that position, but the shopping habits have not fully caught up yet. Let us return to the market floor for a moment because there is a ritual happening right now that most casual observers miss entirely. Between every few fish, the vendor pauses. Not to rest, he is not resting, he is resetting. He rinses the board. He wipes his knife. He checks the ice around the cut pieces and adds more if needed. He looks at his remaining whole fish and makes a quick mental inventory of what he has and what he needs to break down before the morning rush peaks. This constant micromanagement of the workspace is what separates a professional operation from an amateur one. The pause is not a break in the work. It is part of the work. Quality is maintained in the 30 seconds between fish as much as it is in the 10 minutes of cutting. There is a specific skill that experienced tuna vendors develop that almost no one outside the trade knows about: the ability to accurately estimate the yield of a whole fish before cutting it open. Yield in this context means the percentage of the total fish weight that will become sellable product. The 4 loins minus the trim and loss from bones, skin, head, and tail. A 60-pound yellowfin might yield 40 pounds of sellable loin meat depending on the individual fish. An experienced vendor can look at a whole tuna and estimate that yield within a few percentage points based on the body shape, the belly fullness, and the overall proportions. This yield estimation directly informs the price they need to charge per pound of cut fish to make their margins work. It is applied mathematics performed by eye, informed by thousands of previous fish. Here is something that will change how you approach buying tuna forever: the concept of what chefs call the flavor window. Every piece of fresh fish has an optimal eating window, a period of time after cutting when the flavor is at its absolute peak. For tuna, that window is generally between 1 and 48 hours after the fish is broken down, assuming proper refrigeration throughout. In the first hour after cutting, the flesh is still very fresh, but some of the volatile flavor compounds have not yet had time to fully develop. Between 4 and 24 hours after cutting, the flavor is at its most complex and complete. Beyond 48 hours under refrigeration, the flavor begins to simplify, and the texture starts to change in ways that most palates can detect even without being able to articulate exactly what has shifted. This is why buying from an open market where you can see the fish being cut in front of you gives you a precision on freshness that no grocery store date label can provide. The concept of umami, the fifth taste beyond sweet, salty, sour, and bitter, is nowhere more relevant than in the context of fresh tuna. Tuna flesh is extraordinarily high in naturally occurring glutamates, the compounds that create the savory depth we recognize as umami. This is why tuna pairs so naturally with other high umami ingredients like soy sauce, miso, seaweed, mushrooms, and aged cheeses. The flavor is already pointing in that direction. You are not imposing a flavor profile on the fish, you are amplifying one that is already there. Understanding this basic flavor science changes how you approach seasoning and pairing at home. You stop trying to transform the fish and start trying to support what it already is. Now let us talk about what happens on the other side of this market transaction. What you do when you get the fish home. Because buying exceptional raw product and then handling it poorly at home is one of the most common and most avoidable mistakes in home cooking. The enemy of fresh fish at home is temperature and time. The moment your tuna leaves the vendor's ice, a clock starts. If you are going home directly, immediate refrigeration as soon as you arrive, unwrapped from the paper, placed on a clean plate, covered loosely. If you are not cooking it until the next day, keep it as cold as possible without freezing, ideally on a plate set over a bowl of ice in the refrigerator. If you bought more than you plan to cook in the next 2 days, freeze it properly. Wrap it tightly in plastic film first, then in aluminum foil, then in a freezer bag with the air pressed out. Properly frozen tuna maintains quality for up to 3 months. Improperly frozen tuna, unwrapped with air exposure, develops freezer burn within weeks and the flavor is ruined. The thawing process for previously frozen tuna is as important as the freezing process. The worst thing you can do is thaw tuna on the counter at room temperature. The outside warms and sits in the bacterial growth temperature range while the inside is still frozen. The correct method is a slow thaw in the refrigerator over 12 to 24 hours. If you need it faster, place the still-sealed tuna in a bowl of cold, not warm, running water. Cold water thawing takes about an hour for a standard steak and keeps the surface temperature safe throughout the process. Never microwave thaw tuna. The uneven heat ruins the texture irreversibly before the fish is even cooked. Let us spend some time on the subject of raw tuna preparations because this is an area where American home cooks are increasingly interested and often uncertain about safety. Tuna tartare, tuna poke, and sashimi have all moved significantly into mainstream American home cooking over the past decade, driven partly by the rise of Hawaiian poke as a national food trend and partly by the broader American comfort with Japanese cuisine. The question of safety when eating tuna raw is legitimate and deserves a direct answer. The FDA recommends that all fish intended to be served raw be previously frozen to specific temperatures to eliminate parasites. Commercially processed sushi-grade tuna sold at reputable markets has typically already been through this freezing process. For tuna bought at an open market labeled as sushi-grade, the vendor should be able to confirm the freezing history. Parasites in tuna are far less common than in freshwater fish and certain other ocean species, but the freezing recommendation exists for good reason, and responsible handling requires taking it seriously. The poke preparation in particular deserves attention because it is the raw tuna application most American home cooks are most likely to attempt. Authentic Hawaiian poke, before it became a mainland bowl trend, is a simple preparation of raw fish, sea salt, sesame oil, and limu seaweed. The simplicity is the point. When the fish is fresh and the quality is there, complexity is counterproductive. The mainland version, with its dozens of toppings and sauces, often exists to compensate for mediocre fish. When you start with market-fresh tuna cut an hour ago, you do not need sriracha mayo and crispy onions to make it interesting. You need salt and restraint. Consider for a moment the cultural history embedded in the way tuna is consumed around the world and what that history can teach an American cook standing at this market stall today. In Japan, the relationship with tuna goes back centuries, but the modern obsession with bluefin specifically began only in the post-war period when refrigeration and aviation made it possible to move ultra-fresh fish across Japan's geography rapidly. The auction culture at Toyosu Market in Tokyo, where a single bluefin tuna can sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars on New Year's morning, is a relatively modern phenomenon built on ancient appreciation. In Mediterranean countries, preserved tuna, botarga, or dried cured tuna roe, and oil-packed tuna ventresca represents centuries of ingenious food preservation that predates refrigeration entirely. In the Philippines, fresh tuna is grilled whole over charcoal at roadside stalls in a preparation that prioritizes simplicity and smoke over everything else. Each of these cultural approaches to the same animal reflects a different set of values and constraints, and each one has something to teach. The American approach, a thick steak, seared hot and fast, eaten medium rare, is one valid expression of tuna's potential. It is far from the only one. Here is a thought experiment worth sitting with as you watch this vendor work. Imagine that everything you are seeing right now, the whole fish, the hand cutting, the visible freshness, the direct conversation between buyer and seller, imagine that this entire mode of food acquisition disappeared. replaced entirely by pre-packaged, modified atmosphere, centrally processed fish product distributed through national supermarket chains with no direct connection between the person eating the food and the person who caught or sold it. That scenario is not hypothetical. It has largely already happened for most of the American population. The open fish market is the exception, not the rule, in 21st century American food culture. The question of whether that shift represents progress or loss is not a simple one, but it is worth asking seriously. What do we give up when we trade transparency and directness for convenience and consistency? What gets lost when food becomes purely a logistics problem? The answer to that question is not only philosophical, it is practical. When you buy fish at an open market from a vendor whose livelihood depends on the quality of what they sell and the trust of the people they sell it to, the incentive structure aligns with your interests perfectly. A vendor who sells you bad fish loses you as a customer permanently and loses the customers who hear about your experience. Their reputation is their entire business. At a national supermarket chain, the incentive structure is different. Quality is managed to a standard sufficient to avoid liability and minimize waste, but the relationship between any individual employee's actions and any individual customer's experience is diffuse and indirect. The open market creates accountability that the supermarket cannot. That accountability is worth something real and tangible. It shows up in the quality of what you bring home. Look one more time at what is happening on this cutting board. The vendor is finishing his third fish of the morning. The loins are clean, the trim pile is being packaged, the finished steaks are laid on fresh ice. He will break down many more fish before this market closes today. Each one will receive the same level of attention and care, not because anyone is watching, though we are, but because this is simply how he works. The standard is internal, not external. That kind of craftsmanship, that quiet pride in doing something correctly for its own sake, is increasingly rare in any field. When you find it in a food vendor at your local fish market, the right response is to support it consistently and enthusiastically. Show up early, buy regularly, ask questions, bring your friends. The best way to ensure that the open market with its skilled vendors and genuinely fresh product continues to exist in your city is to use it, rely on it, and tell other people about it. There is one more aspect of the open market tuna experience that we have not yet addressed, and it might be the one that matters most to a certain kind of food-passionate person. Buying a whole fish or a large portion of one and breaking it down yourself at home. It is something almost no American home cook attempts, but the vendors at markets like this one will often sell you a whole tuna or a whole loin if you ask. The cost per pound drops significantly when you buy in volume, and the experience of breaking down a large fish at home with a good knife, a little guidance from the vendor, and the willingness to make some imperfect first cuts is genuinely one of the most satisfying and educational things a home cook can do. You will waste some meat on your first attempt. You will do better on your second. By your fifth whole fish, you will understand the anatomy of a tuna better than most people who eat it regularly, and that understanding will make you a permanently better cook of everything that swims. The vendor at this stall would tell you the same thing if you asked him. He did not start this career knowing how to do this. He started it making imperfect cuts on forgiving fish under the guidance of someone who had already made all the mistakes. The knife work you are watching today is the product of that learning process, years of repetition, correction, and accumulated understanding. You are not watching a gifted person doing something effortless. You are watching a skilled person doing something that required effort to become what it now appears to be. That is the truth behind every form of genuine craftsmanship. The ease is earned. And that is the final thing worth saying about what you have witnessed here today. A fish market is not just a place to buy fish. It is a place where the real food system, the one built on knowledge, skill, relationship, and genuine quality, is still visible and still functioning. Every city that has one is lucky. Every person who uses one regularly is making a choice about the kind of food culture they want to exist. The choices individual buyers make, repeated across thousands of transactions, determine what survives. The open market survives because enough people value what it offers. Keep valuing it. Keep showing up. The open market is an act of resistance against the homogenization of food. It is a declaration that origin matters, that skill matters, that the relationship between a buyer and a seller built on trust and repeated honest exchange matters. It is also, simply and practically, the best place to buy fish in any city that has one. Both things are true simultaneously and neither one diminishes the other. Now here is a question for you, and we genuinely want your answer in the comments section below. Have You ever bought fish directly from an open market, or do you always end up buying from a grocery store? And here is the one that really gets people talking. If you had to eat tuna prepared only one single way for the rest of your life, what would you choose? Grilled, pan-seared, completely raw as sushi, or straight out of a can? Drop your answer below right now. We read every single comment on this channel and we respond regularly. The comment section on Made Factory TV is one of the most genuinely interesting food conversations happening on YouTube, and we want you in it. Let us talk about something that most people buying fish at a market never even think about: the journey this tuna made before it ever reached this cutting board. Because the fish being broken down right in front of you did not simply appear here, it traveled. And the distance it covered to reach this stall is genuinely staggering when you stop to think about it. Commercial tuna fishing happens across enormous stretches of ocean. The Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, these are not fishing trips. They are extended voyages that can last weeks at a time. Fishing vessels equipped with sonar, satellite positioning, and temperature mapping technology hunt tuna the way a chess player reads a board. Tuna follow temperature gradients in the ocean. They cluster along the edges where cold upwellings meet warm surface water because that is where their prey concentrates. Finding that edge, that invisible line in the open ocean, is the skill that separates a productive fishing captain from one who comes back light. Once a school is located, the fishing happens fast. Purse-seine vessels deploy massive nets that encircle the entire school and then cinch at the bottom like a drawstring bag. Longline vessels set lines stretching miles across the surface, each one carrying hundreds of baited hooks. Pole and line vessels, smaller, more selective, use live bait to attract tuna to the surface, and individual fishermen with poles and barbless hooks pull them board one at a time. Each method produces different results in terms of volume, species selectivity, and bycatch. Pole and line is the most selective and sustainable. Purse-seining is the most efficient but historically responsible for significant bycatch issues. The fishing method matters, and increasingly it matters to the buyers at markets like this one. After the catch, the fish are bled immediately. This is a critical step that most consumers have never heard of. A tuna that is not bled immediately after capture retains blood in the flesh that breaks down rapidly and produces lactic acid and compounds that degrade the flavor. Properly bled tuna, a quick cut through the gill arches that allows the heart to pump the blood out naturally, produces dramatically cleaner, sweeter flesh. Then the fish is packed in ice or transferred to refrigerated seawater tanks. The window between catch and ice is measured in minutes at a professional operation. Every extra minute the fish spends at ambient ocean temperature is a minute of quality lost. Now watch the vendor again. He is reaching for his next fish, and you can see something in the way he handles it. A kind of respect that is difficult to put into words but easy to recognize. People who work closely with raw ingredients for years develop a relationship with those materials that is almost philosophical. He knows that what he is holding represents effort and risk and ocean and distance. The fish did not get here easily. His job is to honor that by cutting it correctly. Here is something that will surprise most Americans who grew up buying fish in supermarkets. The species of tuna being cut at open markets varies enormously by region and season, and that variation matters deeply to flavor. On the East Coast, you are more likely to encounter yellowfin and big eye. On the West Coast, albacore runs are seasonal and beloved. In Gulf Coast markets, blackfin tuna, smaller and intensely flavored, appears in ways it rarely does elsewhere. Knowing your region and its seasonal fish calendar is one of the most valuable pieces of knowledge a home cook can have. A fish that is in season locally is almost always superior to an out-of-season fish that has been shipped from far away. The vendor at a good open market knows the calendar better than anyone. Let us pause on the yellowfin specifically because it is the species you are most likely to encounter at an open market on any given morning across most of the country. Yellowfin tuna, also sold under the Japanese name ahi, is one of the most athletically extraordinary animals in the ocean. It can swim at speeds exceeding 45 miles per hour. It can dive to depths of over 3,000 feet. Its body temperature is regulated above the surrounding water, which is almost unique among fish, and gives it the sustained muscle output to chase prey relentlessly. The flesh that results from this physiology is dense, lean, and deeply flavored, high in protein, rich in omega-3 fatty acids, and surprisingly low in calories relative to its nutritional density. When you hold a yellowfin steak in your hand, you are holding the muscle of one of the most powerful animals in the ocean. That context changes how it feels to cook it. But here is a question worth sitting with for a moment. Where exactly did the tuna you are looking at right now spend its life? The answer is genuinely global in a way that is almost hard to process. A yellowfin tuna sold at a fish market in Florida might have been caught in the mid-Atlantic. The albacore at a Seattle market might have come from the waters off the coast of Oregon or Washington on a recent troll fishing trip, or it might have come from as far as the Central Pacific. Modern cold chain logistics make distance almost irrelevant to freshness when the handling is done correctly every step of the way, but it also means the fish you are buying carries a geography that most grocery store labels will never fully tell you. Some vendors at serious fish markets can tell you that geography exactly. They know their suppliers personally. They have visited the boats. They have relationships with specific fishing captains whose catch quality they trust completely. This level of supply chain knowledge is increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. When a vendor knows exactly where their fish came from, they can answer the freshness question with total confidence rather than estimating. That confidence transfers directly to you as the buyer. You are not guessing, you know. Now let us talk about what happens to the pieces of tuna that do not sell at the market before closing time, because this is a part of the open market ecosystem that most observers never see. The fish does not disappear at the end of the day. Experienced vendors have established relationships with local restaurants, often small independent spots rather than large chains, who send someone to the market in the final hour specifically to buy the remaining cuts at end-of-day prices. A restaurant that builds its menu around whatever is freshest and most affordable that day, the kind of menu that changes constantly, lives and thrives on this relationship with the market. The fish that a buyer passed on at 8 in the morning because the price was too high becomes the special on a restaurant's chalkboard menu that evening at 7. Nothing is wasted. The market feeds itself completely. There is also a community dimension to open fish markets that is easy to miss if you are only there to buy and leave. The vendors know each other. They have been working the same market together for years in many cases. There is a competitive dynamic, certainly. Everyone wants to sell their fish first. But there is also a genuine camaraderie built from shared early mornings, shared industry knowledge, and shared dependence on the same supply chain. When a vendor has an exceptionally good catch come in, word moves through the stalls quietly. When someone has a rough week because the boats came back light, the other vendors notice. This is a community that operates on trust and reputation built over years of showing up and doing the work correctly. The generational aspect of fish market culture in America is something worth documenting and preserving. Many of the vendors working these stalls today learned from a parent or an older relative who learned from someone before them. The technical skills, the knife work, the species identification, the freshness assessment, the understanding of how different cuts behave under different cooking methods, these are not things you read in a book and immediately apply. They are passed down through direct mentorship and years of repetition. A 20-year-old learning to break down tuna at an open market today is receiving knowledge that has been refined and transmitted across multiple human lifetimes. That is not nothing. That is a living tradition. Here is a fact about tuna that even dedicated food lovers often do not know. The fat content of a tuna varies significantly depending on where in the fish the flesh comes from, the season in which the fish was caught, and what that individual fish has been eating. Tuna caught in colder months, after a period of feeding heavily on nutrient-rich prey, will have noticeably higher fat content and richer flavor than the same species caught in warmer months when metabolism is running high and fat stores are being burned for energy. A vendor who sources from the same boats consistently over time develops an almost intuitive understanding of these seasonal cycles. When the fat content is high on a particular catch, they know it before they even cut the fish open based on how the belly feels and how the fish moves when handled. This is knowledge that no app or algorithm currently replicates. Watch how buyers at this market interact with the vendor compared to how people interact with a supermarket fish counter employee. At the supermarket, the conversation is transactional at best. How much is the salmon? Can you cut that smaller? Here, buyers are asking real questions and getting real answers. What came in this morning? How does this yellowfin compare to what you had last week? Is this belly or loin? How long will it hold if I cannot cook it until tomorrow? The vendor answers everything directly and without hesitation because he knows his product completely. That exchange of genuine information is something that makes the open market not just a shopping experience but an education every single time you visit. Let us talk specifically about buying tuna for searing, because this is the preparation that most home cooks in America attempt, and most get slightly wrong in ways that are easy to fix once you understand what is actually happening in the pan. The goal of a seared tuna steak is a deeply caramelized exterior crust with a cool, raw, or barely warmed center. Achieving this requires resolving a fundamental tension. You need intense surface heat to build the crust quickly before the interior has time to cook through. The mistakes most home cooks make are using a pan that is not hot enough before the fish goes in, using too much oil which drops the surface temperature, and moving the fish before the crust has fully released from the pan surface. A properly seared tuna steak will release itself when the crust is ready. If you try to flip it and it sticks, the crust is not done. Wait another 30 seconds, it will tell you when it is ready. Seasoning deserves its own discussion because it is where a lot of home cooks either underdo or overdo it with fresh tuna. A piece of market-fresh yellowfin or big eye at this quality level needs salt and nothing else if you want to taste the fish. But sesame seeds pressed into the surface before searing create a crust with an extraordinary textural contrast. Black and white sesame mixed together for visual impact and flavor depth. A thin coat of soy sauce brushed on the surface after searing, not before, adds umami without creating steam in the pan. A squeeze of lemon or yuzu, the moment the steak comes off, heat brightens the entire flavor profile. These are not complicated additions. They enhance without covering. With fish this good, the goal of seasoning is amplification, not transformation. Think for a moment about the broader picture of what you have been watching today at this market. This vendor arrived here before the sun came up. He received fish, assessed it, organized his stall, and prepared his equipment all before the first customer arrived. By the time the market is in full swing, he has already been working for hours. And he will do this again tomorrow morning and the morning after that. This is not a casual relationship with the food supply. This is a commitment to a particular way of working that is increasingly rare in an era when so much of our food arrives pre-processed, pre-portioned, and pre-packaged by systems designed for efficiency over craftsmanship. What you see here is craftsmanship. It is slower than a machine. It is less consistent than automation. And it is better in ways that matter to anyone who genuinely cares about what they eat. The open fish market is not a nostalgic artifact. It is not a quaint relic of a pre-industrial food system that exists only for tourists and food photographers. It is a fully functioning, economically active part of the food supply in cities and coastal communities across America. It serves restaurants, home cooks, and professional buyers daily. It responds to seasonal availability in real time. It maintains a quality standard that industrial processing simply cannot match for the segment of buyers willing to engage with it seriously, and it will continue to exist as long as there are people who care enough about what is on their PLA. 8 to show up early on a Saturday morning and watch a skilled vendor do something extraordinary with a knife. If this video showed you something you had never thought about before, if it made you see a simple everyday piece of fish in a completely different way, hit that like button right now. It costs you absolutely nothing, and it makes a real difference in helping this channel reach more people who love discovering how real food actually works in the real world. And if you want to keep going deeper into open markets, incredible knife skills, and the craft and the real people behind the food you eat every single day, subscribe to Made Factory TV right now. We post every single week, and every video is built from the ground up to show you something genuinely worth your time. The subscribe button is right there on your screen. Join the community. We will see you in the next one.